So we are getting into the fundamentals of crude, right? So as all of us know, we depend on crude oil for energy. It is not just like gold or something we use energy. See, nobody invests in crude oil, but we invest in gold, right? So why do we invest in gold? So we consider, like especially in India, we consider it as an investment that we maybe pass on as a legacy for our children, or we kind of gift it to someone. Okay, you kind of use gold as an investment, but do you think crude is an investment? No. So people are actually dependent on crude as a source of energy. So countries trade crude oil, companies trade. Why? Because they are basically interested in taking crude oil, maybe to produce maybe petrol, diesel, or some other products that is commercially viable. Now, when I talk about the different types of crude, okay, when I kind of talk about the different types of crude, uh, definitely there is something called a sweet crude oil, sweet and sour crude. There is light and heavy crude. So these are some different types of crude, and this basically refers to the like specific gravity and the composition in terms of sulfur, etc. Okay, so basically sour crude oil will be having more than 0.5 percentage sulfur content. Okay, while sweet crude oil obviously will be having lesser than 0.5 percentage sulfur. Now sweet crude oil is something that is much more easier and quicker to extract, while sour crude oil is a bit more tough. Now, when it comes to light and heavy crude, it basically talks about the viscosity, specific gravity, all these things, and their hydrocarbon chain, all these factors. And we, as a trader, we need not actually be getting too much focus into this, because we are not going to do any chemical engineering over here. We are here to trade, right? But it's highly advised that you understand what are the difference, that is light and heavy crude, sweet and sour crude. Now alongside, what you should be focusing on is the different benchmarks of crude. So this is pretty much important. Okay, so when I say the different benchmarks, now we know that Nifty 50 is the benchmark of National Stock Exchange, Sensex 30 is the benchmark of Bombay Stock Exchange. Similarly, when it comes to crude oil, there are certain benchmarks, because as I discussed earlier, that crude oil is a global commodity. So the price, the demand, the supply that is happening around the world are actually interrelated with each other. Now, due to the very same reason, now since different countries are extracting crude, different countries are importing and exporting crude, it is actually very much needed that we actually keep some sort of benchmark for these commodities as well. Else, how could we actually measure the quality, and how could we actually measure the uh, or mention the price that could be associated with each particular product? So there should be actually some sort of classification or standards in order to grade the oils, right? And that is exactly why we have majorly three crude benchmarks, and one is WTI, other one is Brent oil, and the other one is Dubai crude. Okay, so as all of you know, like when we talk about crude oil only, first thing that comes to your mind is Saudi Aramco. Now you must have heard about Saudi Aramco's investment in Reliance. Okay, Saudi Aramco, then the deserts, all these things comes to your mind, right? Now let's talk about the major crude benchmark. This is very much important. So first of all, let's talk about WTA. So WTA, or Western Texas Intermediate, is the sweet crude oil that we talked earlier. Sweet crude oil, and once again, this is produced in America. Okay, so that is why the name Western Texas Intermediate, WTI. Okay. One more thing I could tell to you is that you must have heard about the US shell oil also, right? So this is the same thing, WTA. Now, if you are a investingview.com user, if you want to see the WTI chart, just on the right hand side on commodity section, you can see the price of WTI. Now, if you want to search for it, you search for CL. Okay, CL, if you search for, that is a short key. If you search for CL, you will be able to see the Western Texas Intermediate chart. Now, The other benchmark for crude is Brent oil. Okay. Now, when we speak about Brent oil, okay, Brent oil is the most majorly used crude oil benchmark. Okay, that is like it is the one that is being used mostly, and the European region, right? The European region, they completely focus on the Brent itself. Now, this actually consists of both light and sweet crude. Okay, both light and sweet crude oil is the one that falls in this particular category. Now, every crude oil will be actually having some sort of mixture also, but let's not get into the chemical engineering side or the chemical composition side, because we are here to trade. It is just enough that we understand the fundamentals, just get an overview. Now, Dubai crude, when it comes to Dubai crude, so it is basically the price medium for the Dubai and Oman crude oils, which is basically sour in nature. So we talked that US oil is sweet, while this one is sour. Okay. Now, the crude oil which is basically produced in the Middle East, right, and that is kind of exported to our Asian countries, kind of use Dubai crude as the benchmark. So understand WTA, or the Western Texas Intermediate, the US or the US oil, is one benchmark. The US oil's benchmark is WTI, that would be better. Brent oil, which is basically prevailing in the European nations. Then the Dubai crude. So these are the three major benchmarks of crude oil. Now, now we are from India, right? So since we are from India, now we should be knowing like what is the crude that we kind of import. So we Indians, like, we kind of import majorly the Brent oil. Okay, Brent oil is what we import majorly. However, realize for yourself that even though we are importing Brent oil, I'm not telling you we don't import anything else, but we majorly, like, mostly our import is of Brent oil itself. But when we trade crude oil, right? When we are trading crude oil, as I mentioned, at the exchange called MCX, or Multi Commodity Exchange, the benchmark that we consider at MCX is nothing else but WTA, or of US oils. Okay, so the price of the crude that we see on MCX is directly dependent on WTA. So WTA is considered as the benchmark for the crude that is traded on MCX. You call it as MCGB1. Okay, let's get into that later. So understand, even though we are importing Brent oil, we focus on trading with WTA as the benchmark. Now, if you're a trading view user, you should be checking out for US oil. If you are an investingview.com user, you should be searching for CL. Okay, because these are some common sorts of doubts that people often ask me. Now, let's kind of get into some more specifics. Now, as I mentioned, like, first of all, when I talk about crude oil, first image that comes into your mind is the deserts or these things. So there are even pipelines. There are like rigs, oil rigs. We say there are actually rigs in the US also, but majorly the deserts, the Middle East deserts are the ones that come into your mind. Okay, now when it actually comes to uh, the countries, okay, when it actually comes to let's talk about our country first. So first of all, like India, we majorly export almost 80 percentage of our demand is meant by imports itself. We actually import it directly. Okay, 80 percentage of it. Now, when we are talking about that, we are importing 80 percentage of our crude oil into the country, then definitely you should realize for yourself the price of crude oil in the international markets play a big role for India, right? Why? Because if the price of crude oil is actually shooting up, then definitely India, being a developing country, it in turn will increase the price of petrol, diesel. So if the price of petrol and diesel is going up, what will happen? If the price of petrol and diesel is going up, definitely the transportation cost will go. So if transportation cost goes up, what will happen? Definitely the price of each and every product that is available in the market for consumption, that will also go up. So which has actually a negative role in our economy, right? If the price of crude oil goes up, since we being an importing country, if the price of crude oil goes up, our expense is going high. our expenses going high, and in turn the price of each and every product will also go up, which will in turn create inflation. Inflation meaning you having to pay a, a higher amount for purchasing the same product as what you had to pay earlier. Okay, so as far as India being an importing country is concerned, definitely the increase in crude oil prices will uh, have a negative impact on our economy, definitely. Now, when I was just talking about this increased price in crude oil, a lot of factors are there. So the global demand, global supply, all these things are there. Now, let me just talk to you about an organization called OPEC. Okay, so many of you must have heard about it. The OPEC meeting. It mostly comes up in news, and OPEC meeting is scheduled this day, that day. Now, OPEC is actually an organization. Okay, as the name stands for OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Okay, so it was founded, if I'm not wrong, it was founded in 1960. Okay, it was founded in 1960 by Saudi Arabia, Iran, Kuwait, Iraq, then one more country, yeah, Venezuela. Okay, so these are the countries that were the first countries in the organization, and why they kind of came up this with this particular organization is due to the fact that they actually needed to create a balance between the supply and demand of crude that is existing in the world to protect their own personal interests. Obviously, they are doing business. Okay. Now you would be wondering like how can this particular organization kind of decide what is happening around the world? Are there some sort of Illuminati? Okay, so that is what is going to happen. That is going to be the thought that is going to come up in your mind. Are there some Illuminati or something? So what we understand is this particular organization, right? They're kind of so powerful. They actually account to almost 40 percentage of the global crude oil supply. So 40 percentage of the production of crude oil is generated by this particular organization. Okay, that means just think about it. So out of 140 percentage of crude is supplied by a particular organization. So just think about it. Like if there are 100 pumps which has the same quantity of petrol, it's like 40 of those pumps are owned by a single person. Okay. Same way. Now you understand like that's how the Middle East could have become so rich. The Saudi Arabia, the Dubai. Why? Because if you look at the images of uh, Arabs, if you basically check out the images of Arabs or the Dubai countries like Dubai, Bahrain, Saudi, and all, like maybe some 20, 30 years back, things were not the same. Just think about, just have a look. Just not 30. Let's look back like 50 years or 40 years back, or 50 years back. That will be better. And just see the kind of development that has taken place. Okay, the kind of money they would have made by exporting crude. Okay, so OPEC was founded to protect the interest, as I said. So how can they do that? Just think. So let's say that the price of crude oil is basically falling down. Now the countries in the organization they kind of come to a decision. Okay, now we'll start cutting down the production rates. We'll kind of start cutting down the production rates. Then what could actually happen is because the production rates are down, supply is down, and let's say the same demand is actually existing, then what could potentially happen is the price could shoot up. The price could basically move up. And they have done this many times. They have decided to cut supply, they have increased supply at times. So a lot of things has been done. So as we know, as in the case of stock markets also is purely about supply and demand, right? So here also it is purely based on supply and demand. So they have the power to increase supply, they have the power to decrease supply. Now since they contribute almost 30 to 50%, sorry, 40 percentage we can say of the global crude oil production, they have a monopoly in this. Okay, so we have talked about OPEC, and we have actually talked about the countries in it majorly. Now all the Middle East countries are there. Now let's quickly talk about the major other producers of crude. Now realize for yourself it is not just Middle East. Now we have Russia, As we talk, like earlier we had Venezuela, the now we have USA, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and all leading as the producers of crude. Okay, now we have these three countries actually leading as the producers of crude. Okay, so now if you have a view, okay, oil rigs can be found only in deserts. Just change that view. We have USA, Russia, and all. Now, if these are the major producers, then who do you think are the major consumers? Why do we need energy? Okay, so as humans, we need energy to carry out our day-to-day activity. If I don't eat food, I don't have energy. Okay, so some people say, okay, the kind of energy I have while speaking is pretty much low. Actually, no, it's not because I don't have food. It is because like that is my nature. Okay, so similarly, each one of us needs energy, right? We need energy to fuel our day-to-day activities. Similarly, countries need energy in the form of crude oil to power up, to fuel, obviously to fuel the vehicles, fuel the power plants, and in turn this power is going to be used to fuel the nation. How? The development activities, the work, all the constructions, all these things need energy, right? So how do you think we'll be getting this energy? So obviously we need crude, and due to the very same reason, who has a higher potential? Definitely the emerging economies, like uh, India, China. Okay, so Japan, so India, China, and all, like they have a huge demand for energy. Why? Because they are emerging. They're growing at such fast rates right now because of economic slowdown and all of that, because of Corona. Let's keep that aside. Apart from that, India is an emerging economy. You know that. So we, China, India, who are fighting right now, we are actually the major demand driving countries. Okay, now on while like on the consumption side, obviously USA. So when we check out the global carbon footprint and all, like somebody who leads on top, USA, right? So USA, then other developed, well-developed countries. I need not name all this because you are already familiar. Okay, these countries are the major consumers as well. Now, definitely due to the very same reason, the GDP growth rates in the developing countries, for example, China, India, and all, they will also have a role to play in the pricing of crude. Now, now what you should kind of realize is like from like whatever we have discussed so far, just kind of take away that since this is a global commodity, we have a lot of dependency on the international markets since we majorly import crude oil, almost 80% of it. The international production of crude, or the rates at which our suppliers are giving us, it has a huge role to do with our country's personal growth. Okay,